Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today we're actually going to be talking about rain frogs and their care. I have two of my little guys here. This is Linguini and Ravioli. So I have realized that there's not that much information about these guys, especially in the States, about their care. So I did want to do a little care video about them. I've had these guys now for about a year and a half and they're getting extremely big and they're happy and healthy. I did want to preface this video with saying that this is how I personally care for mine and this is what works best for me. I'm just sharing information. I'm not saying anyone's views are right or wrong because there is so little information about these guys' care, especially in the United States. And this video actually wouldn't be possible without my two really good friends that are in the reptile industry. So Jam Exotic is where I actually purchased them from, and also Frogs Direct. They're both breeders. They've both been breeding frogs for a very, very long time now, and they've both been keeping rain frogs for a very long time as well before they kind of became popular in the US market. Rain frogs have been a lifelong dream of mine to own, and I finally have them, which I'm very excited about. I see them a lot more popular in Asian countries versus the States, but they are becoming popular in the States due to social media. They're kind of just all over my feed now. So without further ado, here's our little rain frog care video. A brief intro on rain frogs and why they're so hard to study and why there's so little information about these guys online. So rain frogs are actually found in several countries in Africa, and they're also highly seasonal, which makes them really hard to observe. And the reason why they're so hard to study and there's so little information is because they live their whole lives pretty much underground. Leads us to our next question, and that is, why are they so hard to breed / why are they so rare in the US? So James over at Jam, excuse me, I'm just gonna read my slides over here. So I asked him the question why they're so hard to breed and why they're so rare. And he said, like Pac-Man frogs, they require a seasonal cue to breed in the wild. They come out to breed when it starts raining, hence gives them the name rain frogs. And he also mentioned that he believes soil texture is very important when it comes to breeding them. Over at Frogs Direct stated that they're difficult to breed in captivity due to how they actually breed. The males produce a glue on their front arms and actually glue themselves to the females. The females then burrow down into the sand and make a cavern to lay their eggs, where they will remain until developed into full-grown frogs. They're just a really complicated species that are a little bit more difficult to breed than your average frog. What we do know about them though is that they are communal animals, so you are able to house groups together. Mike mentioned that groups between 2 and 5 are okay in a 20 to 40 gallon tank. The larger the tank, the easier the temperature gradients can be offered. And James mentioned that for every 12 by 12, 2 can be housed, but keep in mind females are much larger than males, so for 2 big females you might need a little bit more space. I personally have the Exoterra Low, and it is 24 inches by 18 by 12. I am looking, actually, since they are getting a little bit bigger, to upgrade them to a longer and lower tank so they have a little bit more space to burrow around. Leads us into our next topic, which is going to be tank parameters, temperature, humidity, and also substrate, all that good stuff. So I did ask them, what is the best substrate to use? How thick should the substrate be? And why is this so important? Personally, I use what James uses over at Jam because that's where I got my frogs. I know different breeders and different keepers use different things. However, this is what I personally use. So the first soil or substrate that I've been using is this Amazonia aqua soil from ADA. I actually got this on Amazon. It is a Japanese brand, so I believe it comes straight from Japan. He did mention if the soil is easily crushable, or any substrate that's easily crushable, it should be okay. This is the second option. This is just the Exoterra substratum. I do mix the two. James also told me that the substrate should be at least 3 inches deep. I like to give them a little bit more digging room than that, so mine's about 4 to 5 inches deep. Mike does use a different type of substrate. There's no really right or wrong, just kind of using whatever substrate that works best for you. But Mike says that he uses a 1 to 2 inch base layer of pea gravel followed along by a coarse sand, roughly 3 to 4 inches thick. The pea gravel allows for the extra moisture in the sand to drain out, and it's also deep enough to allow 1 inch of sand to dry out while maintaining some moisture in deeper parts of the sand where the frogs like to settle. For cleaning and maintaining the substrate, I do spot clean daily, and then I also actually remove out all the substrate. I wash it, dry it, and then put it back in. I probably do that about every 3 or 4 months or so. The substrate doesn't tend to get too dirty because it dries out fairly quickly, so there's no like mold or like excess moisture or anything. I also don't miss the enclosure enclosure to where it's like sapping. That's kind of what I do as for cleaning. As for day temperatures, I like to maintain 80 to 86 degrees. It's usually in the 80s. That is maintained with a side heater, which works pretty well. As for at nighttime, I do let it drop to around 72 to 74 degrees. Humidity levels, ambient humidity in the tank is not really measured by like a thermometer or anything. What is really important is actually the humidity in the substrate. I asked Mike and James about their humidity and temps in their enclosures, and Mike mentioned that ambient humidity is not what is needed. Moisture content within the sand is more important. So as long as the sand is 2 to 4 inches moist, in depth is moist, then you're okay. But you want the top 1 inch of the sand to stay dry, because oversaturation of the sand can actually cause bacteria infections within the frogs. But that is for his sand mixture. However, if you're going to be using the substratum and the ADA soil, James, I asked him as well about his temperature and humidity parameters, and he mentioned that humidity level is not measured because of soil humidity, and that's what's important. Just stick your finger in the substrate to see if it's moist. One side dry and one side moist is ideal. A heat pad or heat lamp is used as a heat source. Just make sure humidity is maintained at all times. With my enclosure, I just spray down one side of the enclosure and make sure that that side is always maintaining its moisture and the other side is a little bit more dry. Lifespan in captivity versus the wild is around 10 years in captivity, around that. In the wild is obviously a lot less than that. So that's kind of what the Asian keepers have been saying about their lifespan. Common health issues in captivity with these guys. Personally, I've never had to deal with any crazy health issues with them or any scares. I mean, I take them out, I feed them, and they're perfectly fine. I also weigh them weekly as well, and they all gain really healthy weights. I asked Mike about any health issues, and he did mention that eye infections do happen and water edema. So it's always important to clean out the substrate every 3 to 4 months. You may be asking, what do I feed them and how often do I feed them? For these guys, I feed them once to twice a week, depending on the week. Currently feed mine pinhead crickets, but James also mentioned that they can also eat micro roaches, and they also eat small isopods, basically whatever that can get caught by their tongues. He also said a big female is able to eat a small size dubia, and we also dust with calcium with D3. I do feed them in their enclosures, and they do come out when they're hungry. However, I personally don't do that. I actually was doing that in the beginning a little bit. I was throwing in crickets and letting them hunt when they're hungry, but I also ended up with a lot of dead crickets. It was a lot of cleaning and it got really messy. So I do feed them in a separate container. I personally like doing this because I'm able to watch them eat, watch them hunt, and I can monitor them a lot better. I also monitor their poop as well, so they do poop and pee inside that container. And with that, I'm able to see if there's anything wrong with them. However, some keepers say to not bother them and just let them feed in their enclosure. Others do take them out to monitor them closely. I'm kind of a helicopter parent, so I do like to make sure that everyone's eating properly, because if I just throw crickets in there, I'm not really sure who's eating and who's not eating. Like I mentioned earlier, I do weigh them weekly as well. This is the enclosure that I do take them out in to feed. If I did not feed them in this enclosure, all these dead crickets would be in their enclosure. As you can see, that's all their poop. So this is what rain frog poop looks like, if anyone was interested. And it's also wet because they do pee in here as well. But I do like to monitor their pee and poop to make sure everything looks normal. Future Celine going into the video and realizing that I forgot to state some really important things that I did want to mention. So I did want to talk about how their rain frogs in particular are becoming a very trendy animal to own, especially on social media. There are literally thousands of videos of rain frogs. There's a huge issue with seeing animals on social media and thinking that they're cool or cute and just wanting to buy one. You see it again and again whenever there's new movies coming out, such as Finding Nemo. There was literally a spike in people getting clownfish because everyone thought that they were super cool and everyone can have their own little Nemo and Dory. So people were getting blue tangs, they were getting clownfishes. Even when Game of Thrones came out, everyone wanted a dire wolf. So people were going out and getting huskies unethically, and now there's a shitload of huskies abandoned in the shelters. You see this time and time again with every animal. I'm definitely sad, but I do think that we're going to be seeing that with rain frogs a lot, just because there's countless of videos of them online just looking absolutely adorable. But in reality, people are mishandling them. They're not an animal that you can just handle and play with. They're not toys. They really do prefer to be left alone for a majority of the time. Like mentioned, I only handle my rain frogs when it's feeding time or when I'm weighing them at least like once a week. Other than that, I barely see them. So they're not the type of animal that is like a cool display animal that you're gonna see all the time, or a fun animal that you can play and hold with. Whenever you take on an animal, you are responsible for its livelihood, feeding, cleaning, enclosure, all that good stuff. It all costs money, it takes time. They're not just some animal that you should just go out on a whim on getting. And I also wanted to mention that there is a lot of misinformation about rain frogs, especially in Facebook groups. Just please do your research. It's a species where there's not that much information about, and we're still learning a lot about them to this day. But I would highly recommend reaching out to Jam Jam Exotic or even Frogs Direct if you guys have any additional questions about them and their care. They're both very, very knowledgeable on them. Another thing I did want to mention is that I have seen a couple of sellers try to sell rain frogs individually. I am highly, highly, highly against that. I do not believe that they should be sold individually like that, just because they are communal animals and they thrive in groups. Anyone just selling one rain frog just by itself is just sad and very, very unethical in my opinion. There shouldn't be an excuse to just sell one rain frog by itself. So please, 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 if you're looking to get rain frogs, I would recommend getting 3 or more. I would never just get 1. Even having 2, I feel like that's not enough. So 3 plus, in my opinion, is the best group to start off with. So please, please, please do your research. Even watching this video, I guess consider doing research, but I personally would reach out to people that have rain frogs than just reading some stuff online, because there isn't that much about them. Frogs current enclosure. I do want to get them a little bit bigger one pretty soon. I just have 3 of them in here. They've all been growing happily and healthy in this specific enclosure for the past 1.5 years, and I do take them out once or twice a week for their feedings. I barely see them because they live their lives underneath the substrate, and I did have a really cool backdrop on this enclosure. I had like a bunch of different like plants. It was beautiful at one point, but then I realized they don't even use anything, and then if anything, they bury under the substrate and everything kind of gets ruined. Also with the backdrop, you do have to be careful because one of them actually got themselves stuck under there before. So that is why I removed it. So now their tank is literally barren. All they really need is a good layer of substrate. But most of the time, everyone always thinks having rain frogs is like the coolest thing ever. And yes, they are a very cool species of frogs. However, the truth is I barely see them. Require any special lighting or anything since they are underground most of the time. I do have a side of the tank here. That is pretty much it for this enclosure. Today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and also thank you guys for bearing with me for taking such a long break. If you guys didn't know, my mom did unfortunately pass away not too long ago, so I've been dealing with that, and it's been a really rough couple of weeks, but I am looking to get back onto YouTube, and I'm really, really excited. I have a lot of new content planned, so I hope you guys stay tuned. And Drogon, just wanted to show you guys how big he's gotten. He is currently in shed right now, so he looks very, very dull, but he's just a big man now, and I love him very much. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Bye!